We talked earlier about how if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you already have one of the greatest tools for engaging in conversations that could just lead to the gospel: your story. Something's happened to you and it's very real, and no one can tell you that it didn't. So we encourage you to work on organizing your story into the was, what your life was like before you came to Christ, the what happened, how you actually came into a relationship with Christ, and the is, what your life is like now. So let's talk about how you can use your story once it's been organized. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that everybody has one favorite subject. Do you know what it is? Yeah, themselves. So when you're in conversations with people, it's really just one story or opinion or experience after another, and you have a story and you have experiences that are just as valid as anyone else. And this gives you the opportunity to insert pieces of your story so you can see where it might go. Here's a few ideas of how you can use it. For starters, you can use your story to create interest. We all live interesting lives and we all love to talk about it. So sometimes you can use a piece of your story as bait that just kind of hangs out there to see if anyone will buy it. My background is in music and theater. So if the conversation turns to some of the stuff we've done in our past, I can tell them about some of the productions and performances I've done, how I performed in every state of the United States and many countries of the world. And if someone asks why I stopped, that gives me an opportunity to throw out a piece of my story. Well, I found myself living in Los Angeles pursuing my career. And for some reason, I can't even quite tell you why, I started reading the Bible. And wow, I got to tell you, that changed everything. I just found that I wanted to do something different with my life. Then I just see where that goes. What I did is I brought spiritual things into the conversation. Or if the conversation turns and we begin talking about some of the unique and different things we've done in our lives, I could say something like, I was in Nigeria a few years ago to help build houses for some whose village had been attacked and burned by raiding rebels. If they ask why, I could then tell them, well, when I was younger, I didn't think that much or care that much about what was going on in the world. But after I became a Christian and began reading the Bible, boy, it really caused me to think about the world differently. These are just a few of the pieces from my story that can be used to create interest. I am so convinced that every person wants to experience the reality of God. They're just looking for Him in a package that's real and authentic. Okay, number two, you can use your story to relate. Sometimes in a conversation, people begin to get kind of transparent. They begin to talk about some hard stuff going on in their life, like maybe the loss of someone or something going on at work or going on in their family. Let's say someone opens up about having a really hard time in their marriage, and you can say, "Yeah, I know. It can be really hard." My wife and I were having a really hard time about 10 years ago, and actually, I didn't even think we were going to make it. It was terrible. Then this friend of mine gave me a book about how knowing God introduces a whole new dynamic. And I didn't really know what he meant, but I read it and we kept talking. And I eventually discovered he was right. And now we're doing so much better. This isn't being pushy. This isn't trying to explain the gospel. It's just telling your story. By the way, you can never say things if they're not true. Don't make things up just to relate. I mean, if someone says, "Yeah, I got convicted of cocaine trafficking and I'm headed to prison," you go, "Yeah, I know what you mean." If that's not true, don't say it. There's plenty of real stuff you can say to be able to communicate and relate. And number three is you can use your story to clarify. One of the best times to tell your story is right after you've shared the gospel. I do this just about every time. You've just communicated the most incredible good news about Jesus, and you look at them and they're just kind of not sure what to do next. So you tell them how it happened for you, and that helps to clarify things. Give them a bit of your was. Tell them exactly what happened if you felt a little bit awkward and not sure, and then da 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 da. And this just shows how God works in real time. Now, I hope you've been able to see that bringing up parts of your story brings God into the conversation. It brings the Bible into the conversation. It brings spiritual things into the conversation very naturally and very easy. You're not trying to be pushy. You're not trying to preach. You're just talking. Let me give you one note of caution. Don't use the Jesus card to answer every question because that just sounds so unnatural and so forced. Just relax. And don't be critical and talk like you're better than everybody else because you found Jesus. Just use your story to bring God into the conversation in a very real and authentic and conversational way. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says that we as Christ followers are salt of the earth. And one of the things that salt does is it makes people thirsty. And your story can make people thirsty. And who knows, maybe the next week or the next month or the next year, as God is drawing them, they come into a relationship with God. And it all started with a thirst that began with hearing your story. So organize it and use it because it is powerful.